Appeasement does not work, but decapitation does. Appeasement doesn't work at all, and we can see that with Hitler in World War II. We can see that with Trump today, where Susan Collins is like, well, I didn't vote to impeach Trump because I think he learned his lesson, and then he immediately becomes way worse and then has to be impeached again, and some senators are still not willing to impeach him because he's learned his lesson. Oh no, we're going to be stuck with this guy forever because we didn't vote to impeach him and ban him from office. But we've seen over and over again, you cannot really reason with a bully that mentality of, well, I'll give them my lunch money today, and then that will prevent them from beating me up tomorrow. No, they're going to want it tomorrow. Sociopaths and psychopaths, they don't think like, well, that person was nice to me today, so that means I'm going to lay off of them. That means that person's a sucker, and I'm just going to take more and more shit from them because they'll put up with it. We see those calculations going on constantly within the Democratic Party where they think, oh, we'll just give Republicans everything they want, and then they'll pay us back. No, they'll pay you back never. The Supreme Court vacancy of saying, oh, well, we can't approve Merrick Garland before an election, and then they turn around and do the same thing with Amy Coney Barrett with almost a few weeks. I mean, it wasn't several months, it was several weeks. We see that appeasement does not work. They will always up the ante and escalate it, and then the debate becomes between counter-insurgency, or what I'm calling decapitation. Some people call it anti-terrorism, some people call it counter-terrorism. Counter-insurgency is the strategy of in Afghanistan of winning hearts and minds. We'll win over the people with money and gifts and things like that. And the problem is that you might win over some hearts and minds, but the people with the guns, they'll come in and just kill those people. Give us that money or we're going to kill you right now. Okay, here it goes. Counter-insurgency. It works some of the time, and some of the time it just flat out doesn't. Most of our big successes with it, they were years ago during the World War II aid, and I don't know if we can really, the MacArthur plan for Afghanistan, we had success in Japan because the people were tired of fighting and they were overwhelmed, and these were middle-class people who had something to go back to. Afghanistan, there was nothing to build a democracy out of. When it comes to something like decapitation, this is anti-terrorism and counterterrorism, which is you cut off the head of the snake. And we did this with Al-Qaeda, where we killed bin Laden. Most of the Al-Qaeda people, they go over to ISIS. The group sort of disintegrates. Al-Qaeda's still around, but it's certainly nowhere near what it was. In Libya, people say, oh, that's one of Obama's biggest failures. Wrong again. It was one of his only huge foreign policy successes because we killed Gaddafi. This was a guy that terrorized America for decades. Is Libya a threat to the United States anymore? No, it's not. Donald Trump, for everything he's been wrong about, when he killed the Iranian general Soleimani, there was no real blowback to that because decapitation works, whether it's the head of a drug cartel, you kill him, the cartel pretty much disintegrates, the head of a terrorist group like bin Laden, or the head of a rogue state where we're very worried about a certain dictator or certain rogue actor. Once that person dies, there then becomes a power vacuum. Then there's a lot of infighting, and whoever takes over, they're not really in the mood to challenge the United States because it's like, okay, we could get revenge for Saddam Hussein, but we'd rather build our government up instead of picking another fight with this country that we can't beat and we don't want to. So even though the Iraq War, I was completely dead against it and I wasn't for it, in terms of a war that achieved its objectives of killing Saddam Hussein and instituting a regime change, they did do that. May not have been what we wanted to see, it may not have been as clean or as quick or as inexpensive, but that's a war that actually achieved its objective, whereas in Afghanistan we did not. But that's the difference between just trying to decapitate something and prolonged, extensive, trying to rebuild the society from the ground up counterinsurgency campaign. So right now what's going on in Russia with them invading Ukraine, you could sit there and say, we can't kill Vladimir Putin because then it'll escalate into a nuclear war. Well, who would authorize that? Vladimir Putin. So think about that. People are like, Putin now, he's going to want revenge for killing him. Oh, wait, but he's dead. Whoever the most likely candidates to take over Russia, they don't want to start a war with the United States. They're terrified of a war with the United States. They know they would lose. Nobody who's just taken over a country wants to start a nuclear war over what? The man that they just replaced, the guy that they're secretly relieved is out of the way so that they could become president. They're slightly grateful to the United States, who has essentially allowed them to open the door to become president. They're not wanting to start off on the wrong foot with the country that helped facilitate. This is why Michael Corleone, this is why he killed the heads of the 5 families, basically decapitating his competition because it was sending a strong, clear message. And whoever took over, they didn't want revenge for that. They wanted to take over the family and build their own money and then be like, okay, we're going to build it into what we want it to be. They didn't care about revenge for the ghost. Then the argument flows, well, how do you know you won't just replace Putin with somebody worse than he is? There is nobody worse than he is. That person doesn't exist. Anybody who would be most likely to take over is not a Cold War dinosaur, a former KGB agent who views the West, quote unquote, as though Russia and China really have a lot in common, which is fucking ridiculous. Anybody who's most likely to take over from him has got to be more agreeable because there's no way it could get worse. And then people point to some oligarch who hates the West. Why does that oligarch have power? Because of Putin. He's close and good personal friends with Putin. So if Putin's dead, is he going to have the support to help replace him? No. And so then you have a lot of people, possibly Alexander Navalny, who's who's been in prison under Putin's orders, which would be fantastic. Russia would become a democracy. But even some of Putin's deputies, they're not locked into this particular grievance and sense of revenge against the West. He's singularly obsessed. It's taken us 20 years to wake up to that fact. We've never had a president from George W. Bush who looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul and all that romantic, gushy bullshit that just sounds so ridiculous. As if there could be a worse judge of character than George W. Bush. The man thought Dick Cheney would make a good vice president, so there could not be a worse judge of character than Bush. Obama, Romney said Russia was the biggest threat America had. Well, he laughed at him and thought that was a joke. Then you have somebody like Trump, who was so far up Putin's ass he could check for polyps. I mean, the man was wanting to leave NATO. He was cheering him on. He's like, yeah, Putin's a genius for invading Ukraine. He's never really gone up against the American president that wanted to see his reign end. Hillary might have been that, which is one of the reasons he was so scared of Hillary. That's right. The big bad boogeyman was terrified of the first female president because he thought that would be the first POTUS to really challenge him. Decapitation works, whether it's the Godfather movies or the Night King in Game of Thrones, paging Arya Stark, where are you? If he's not there, I believe this war in Ukraine ends today. I truly do.